And without much further ado, let's bring our first storyteller, Josh.
Thank you all so much for having me tonight. In one of my favorite songs that apparently has nothing to do with immigration, but that's not why I'm citing it, American country artist Brad Paisley has a line about an adoptive father where he says, I hope I'm at least half the dad that he didn't have to be. Now, I've applied variations of that line to a few different people in my life, including my extraordinary immigrant grandmother, Anna Nessie Perlberg. She embodied many things that she didn't have to. She told me about a time many years ago where she and my grandfather were in a restaurant in Chicago, and the owner was just blasting, like at full volume, this TV that was talking about quote unquote illegal aliens taking over America and all this other stuff. My grandmother stood up in that restaurant and shouted, "Turn that down! I'm an immigrant." She was badass, no joke. And proceeded to get into an argument with the owner, by the way, who was also an immigrant. She never said if he actually turned down the TV and she got her way, but it didn't matter. She was righteous and proud to stand up for justice, including with her work on the board of the Chicago Committee to Defend the Bill of Rights. Yeah, she was amazing. She will always be among the most important people in my life. When I was in high school and had no friends my age, it was a very different time in my life, she called me on the phone every single day after school for 4 years. And I ended up writing my college admissions essay for my college applications about our relationship and about those phone calls. In 2011, after I graduated from college, she fell and went to rehab for 6 weeks. And during that time, I moved into her apartment in Chicago to help keep it secure. This unexpectedly turned into an arrangement of us living together for almost 6 years until her death a few years later. The two of us made quite the pair. Let's put it this way. We took up all the space on the sidewalk. She was a small, diminutive 80-something-year-old woman with a cane, and I was a big, tall 20-something-year-old man holding her other arm, often telling her, please move over so other people can pass and walk by. She'd say, I'm entitled, with a crowd of people unable to pass. Growing crowd. I suspect she felt entitled because of her age, but also because of her trauma from World War II. She was a Holocaust refugee, half Catholic and half Jewish, and her family fled the Nazis, barely escaping her birthplace of Prague in 1939 to come to the U.S. and start over. She was an example of living history. She taught me a lot about her home country, the war, her early life in Europe, and her early life in this country as well. And we both adored music. Her mother, Julian Nessie, had been a touring opera singer in Europe in the 1930s and the first female harpist in the Czech Symphony before their family was forced to flee. So my grandmother and I didn't always agree on music. She had, admittedly, in a literal sense, a very Eurocentric sense of aesthetics. Some of the grittier and rawer singers that I love in different genres, like soul music and the blues and country and jazz, she didn't always like. She'd say things like, these voices, they're not beautiful. But we both loved, however, to listen to Ella Fitzgerald with that mellifluous, smooth like melted butter voice that to this day makes me feel joy like nothing else in music. More than anything else, more than any other voice, Ella's was one that we could share. Music was a lifeline bridging our generation gap. In 2016, she published a memoir that she wrote in her late 80s called The House in Prague, and it was inspired by conversations and talks she had given in Chicago public schools classrooms where my brother Mike taught. And many of the students were immigrants, and they connected deeply with her because they too had lost their language and culture when they came to the US. And they came from places like Honduras, Albania, Mexico, all these places that could not have been more different than her birthplace of Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic as it is now. But in many ways, she had more in common with these children than she did with her own children and grandchildren who had not had those experiences. And after her book was published, she got letters and emails and phone calls from readers all over the world, from places like South Africa, Australia, Slovakia, from people who resonated with her story. Over time, her vision and her hearing deteriorated, and we learned in 2017 that she was dying with pancreatic cancer. With the further ascendance of, frankly, fascist tendencies in politics around the world, including in the US, she was terrified. She even, when she was asked in the hospital if she did not want anybody visiting her, and was there any names she didn't want visiting her, she instantly said Trump. Right? She was a badass, as I keep saying. Might become a cliche. No. Towards the end, when she was lying in bed, barely awake, dopey on pain meds, she said something to me that I'll never forget. We'll listen to music together across the skies. Yeah. I almost started crying right there. And I too knew our relationship would continue after her death. I was there when she died 6 days later at a hospice care facility at the age of 89. I'll never forget her. In the years since my grandmother's death, my greatest source of professional joy and enrichment has been being an embedded tutor, which is like a teaching assistant in the United in Truman at Truman College, one of the city colleges of Chicago. Woo, represent. I joined the faculty and staff of Truman about a month before she passed, and I love doing embedded tutoring because I've focused so much and had to improve my own issues with writing and reading at the college level over time that I feel I have valuable insight to share with many different kinds of students. And most of the classes, not all of the classes I've been embedded in, have been ESL classes with many immigrant students. Immigrant students, and it has been one of the most inspiring and rewarding things I've ever done. With everything going on in the world, these students give me hope, including in their willingness to learn from mistakes. And this year, watching immigrant students perform at a storytelling event at Truman, organized by professional storyteller Nestor Gomez. Woo! It reminded me of the exceptional motivation of these immigrant students and also the tenacity of my fearless grandmother who was there in spirit. At the event, the sound system played music from different speakers' home countries. And I thought that if she had been there, she'd want to have some classical music like Dvorak's New World Symphony from Czechoslovakia to back up her story. But her spirit was there with me, listening to music with me across the skies. And now I think, I hope I'm at least half the exceptionally dedicated, fearless, motivated, courageous, lifelong learner, storyteller, and activist that she and each of these students didn't have to be. Thank you.